Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Please consider subscribing and check out our Patreon for more. Enjoy the video. The clock ticked steadily on the office wall, its monotonous rhythm punctuating the dull hum of fluorescent lights. A middle-aged man hunched over his desk, eyes fixed on the computer screen before him. But his mind was elsewhere, wandering to thoughts of her, Samantha. Her desk sat just a few feet away, close enough for him to catch the faint scent of her perfume each time she walked by. He watched from the corner of his eye as she tucked a stray strand of auburn hair behind her ear, her slender fingers moving with a grace that made his heart skip. What would it be like to be her? The thought crept into his mind, unbidden but irresistible. To walk in her shoes, to see the world through those striking green eyes, to know what it felt like to be desired, admired. He shook his head, trying to dispel the fantasy. This wasn't the first time such thoughts had invaded his consciousness, but lately they'd grown more frequent, more intense. It was becoming an obsession. "Hey, can I borrow your stapler?" Her voice startled him from his reverie. He looked up, meeting her gaze, and felt a familiar flutter in his chest. "Of course," he managed, fumbling for the device on his cluttered desk. Their fingers brushed as he handed it over, sending a jolt through his system. "Thanks," Samantha smiled, oblivious to the effect she had on him. "I swear office supplies have legs around here. Can never find anything when I need it." He chuckled, the sound hollow in his own ears. "Yeah, it's a mystery." As she walked away, he found his eyes drawn to the gentle sway of her hips, the confident set of her shoulders. What would it be like to move like that, to command attention without even trying? The rest of the day crawled by in a fog of spreadsheets and meetings. When 5 o'clock finally rolled around, he couldn't get out of the building fast enough. The crisp autumn air hit his face as he stepped outside, a welcome respite from the stifling atmosphere of the office. His feet carried him down familiar streets, past shuttered storefronts and bustling cafes. But his mind remained fixated on Samantha, on the life she must lead beyond the confines of their shared workspace. Lost in thought, he hardly noticed as the sky darkened and the streetlights flickered to life. It wasn't until a gnarled hand grasped his arm that he snapped back to reality with a start. "You seem troubled, dear," croaked a voice. He turned to find himself face to face with an old woman, her wrinkled visage peering up at him from beneath a tattered shawl. Her eyes, though clouded with age, held a glimmer of something. Knowing. I'm fine," he stammered, taken aback by her sudden appearance. The old woman's grip tightened, her bony fingers digging into his sleeve. No, I can see it in your eyes. There's a longing there, a wish unspoken." He tried to pull away, unnerved by her intensity, but found himself rooted to the spot. "What is it you desire?" She pressed, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "To be someone else, perhaps, to walk a mile in another's shoes?" His breath caught in his throat. How could she possibly know? That's ridiculous," he protested weakly. The old woman cackled, a sound like dry leaves rustling in the wind. "Is it now? Well, let's see about that." Before he could react, she pressed something into his palm, a small, smooth stone, warm to the touch. "Make a wish, dear," she whispered. "But remember, be careful what you ask for. You just might get it." With that, she melted back into the shadows, leaving him standing alone on the darkened street, the stone clutched tightly in his fist. He stared at the object in his hand, heart pounding. This was madness, surely. But as he thought of Samantha, of the life he imagined she led, a reckless desire seized him. "I wish," he began, then hesitated. Was he really going to do this? Taking a deep breath, he closed his eyes and spoke the words that would change everything. "I wish I could be Samantha, to live her life, to know what it's like to be her." For a moment, nothing happened. Then a wave of dizziness washed over him. The world seemed to tilt on its axis, colors blurring and sounds distorting. He stumbled, reaching out to steady himself against a nearby wall. As quickly as it had come, the sensation passed. He blinked, disoriented, and looked down at his hands. They weren't his hands. Slender fingers, nails painted a soft pink, trembled before his eyes. He touched his face, feeling the unfamiliar contours, the softness of longer hair brushing against his cheeks. "No," he whispered, but the voice that emerged wasn't his own. It was hers. Panic rising in his chest. She stumbled down the street, searching frantically for a reflective surface. A darkened shop window provided the answer he both craved and feared. Samantha's face stared back at him, green eyes wide with shock. The world spun again, and darkness claimed him. A shrill cry pierced the veil of unconsciousness. His eyes snapped open, heart racing as he tried to make sense of his surroundings. Gone was the familiar comfort of his own bedroom. Instead, he found himself in a small, cluttered space, early morning light filtering through threadbare curtains. The cry came again, more insistent this time. A baby's wail. He sat up, the events of the previous night crashing back over him like a tidal wave. The old woman, the wish, the transformation. Looking down, he saw Samantha's body, clad in a faded t-shirt and shorts. This was real. It had actually happened. The baby's cries grew louder, pulling him from his shock. On unsteady legs, he made his way across the room, following the sound to a small nursery. There, in a second-hand crib, lay a red-faced infant, arms flailing as she screamed her displeasure to the world. "Shh," he tried, the words feeling strange on his tongue. "It's okay, I'm here." He reached into the crib, lifting the baby with hands that didn't feel like his own. The child's weight settled against his chest, and for a moment he froze, unsure of what to do next. "Leslie," he murmured, the name coming to him unbidden. "Your name is Leslie." The baby hiccuped, her cries subsiding as she nuzzled against him. A surge of emotion, foreign yet overwhelming, washed over him. Was this what it felt like to be a mother? The next few hours passed in a blur of diaper changes, bottle feedings, and frantic Google searches on infant care. By the time he managed to get Leslie settled for a nap, he felt like he'd run a marathon. Collapsing onto a worn couch, he took stock of his surroundings for the first time. The apartment was small, sparsely furnished, with signs of financial struggle evident in the patched furniture and bare walls. A stack of bills on the coffee table caught his eye. Picking them up, he felt a knot form in his stomach as he saw the past due notices and final warnings. This was Samantha's life. The woman he'd envied, whose existence he'd romanticized, was struggling to keep her head above water. A phone buzzed nearby, startling him. He found it buried beneath a pile of laundry, the screen lit up with a message. "Sam, don't forget your shift starts at 2. Can't afford to be late again." "Gina!" Panic set in once more. A job. Of course, Samantha had another job beyond the office. How else could she support herself and a baby on a meager salary? He glanced at the clock. 12:30. An hour and a half to figure out where he was supposed to go and what he was supposed to do. After a frantic search, he found a waitress uniform crumpled in the bottom of a laundry basket. The name tag read Sam's Diner. At least that answered one question. Dressing in Samantha's body felt surreal, like playing dress-up in someone else's skin. He fumbled with the bra clasp, cursing under his breath as he struggled to fasten it. A glance in the mirror stopped him short. Samantha's face stared back, but the eyes held a wild, panicked look that seemed out of place on her usually composed features. "You can do this," he told his reflection. "You wanted to be her. Now you have to live her life." The words rang hollow, but there was no time to dwell on regrets. He had a shift to get to. The next challenge presented itself immediately. Leslie. He couldn't leave a baby alone, but he had no idea who usually watched her while Samantha worked. As if in answer to his silent plea, a knock sounded at the door. He opened it to find an older woman standing in the hallway, a knowing smile on her face. "There you are, Sam. I was starting to worry. You're usually out the door by now." He blinked momentarily at a loss for words. The woman's smile faltered. "Everything okay, honey? You look a little out of sorts." "I'm fine," he managed, forcing a smile. "Just a rough night with Leslie." Understanding dawned in the woman's eyes. "Ah, teething again? Poor little munchkin. Well, don't you worry. Grandma's here to save the day." Grandma. Of course. Relief washed over him as he stepped aside to let her in. "Thanks, Mom," he said, the word feeling strange on his tongue. "I don't know what I'd do without you." The woman, Samantha's mother, waved off his gratitude. "That's what family's for, sweetheart. Now go on, get to work. We don't want a repeat of last month's drama." He nodded, grabbing a purse he hoped belonged to Samantha and heading for the door. As he left, he heard Leslie start to fuss again, followed by the soothing tones of her grandmother. The guilt hit him like a physical blow. He was abandoning Samantha's child to go to a job he knew nothing about. What had he gotten himself into? The diner was a greasy spoon affair, all chrome and neon with the perpetual smell of burned coffee hanging in the air. He pushed through the door, heart pounding, praying he could fake his way through this shift. "Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence," drawled a voice from behind the counter. A heavy-set woman with graying hair pinned back in a severe bun fixed him with a stern glare. The name tag on her uniform read Gina. "Sorry," he mumbled, ducking his head in what he hoped was a convincingly contrite manner. "Won't happen again." Gina snorted. "Better not. One more strike and I'll have to let you go, Sam. You know I don't want to do that, but I'm running a business here, not a charity." He nodded, swallowing hard. The realization that Samantha's livelihood hung by such a tenuous thread made his stomach churn. "Now get your apron on and start bussing tables. We've got the dinner rush coming in soon." The next few hours passed in a blur of clinking dishes, barked orders, and aching feet. He fumbled through interactions with customers, earning more than a few odd looks at his clumsy service. By the time his shift ended, he was exhausted, sweaty, and fighting back tears of frustration. As he trudged home, the weight of Samantha's life settled heavily on his shoulders. The physical toll of the day was nothing compared to the emotional burden he now carried. How did she do this day after day? Balancing 2 jobs, a baby, and the constant stress of financial instability? He thought of his own life. The comfortable apartment, the steady paycheck, the freedom to come and go as he pleased. He'd taken so much for granted. Climbing the stairs to Samantha's apartment felt like scaling a mountain. Each step brought him closer to a reality he wasn't sure he was equipped to handle. He opened the door to find Samantha's mother dozing on the couch, Leslie cradled in her arms. The sight brought a lump to his throat. "Oh, you're back," the older woman said, stirring. "How was work?" "Fine," he lied, forcing a smile. "Thanks for watching her." "Always a pleasure," she replied, carefully transferring the sleeping baby to his arms. She was an angel, as usual. "Are you sure you're okay, though? You seem different." He froze, panic rising in his chest. "Different how?" She studied him for a moment, concern etched on her face. "I can't quite put my finger on it. You just don't seem like yourself." "Just tired," he said quickly. "It's been a long day." She didn't look entirely convinced, but nodded. "Well, get some rest. You know I'm always here if you need anything." As she left, he found himself fighting back tears again. The unconditional love and support she offered. It was something he'd never truly appreciated in his own life. With Leslie settled in her crib, he sank onto the bed, emotionally and physically drained. He reached for Samantha's phone, curious to see what other aspects of her life he might discover. The lock screen was a photo of Leslie, gummy smile beaming at the camera. He swiped, guessing at the passcode until he got it right. A notification caught his eye. A dating app. His heart skipped a beat as he opened it, a mix of curiosity and unease washing over him. There were several messages from different men, ranging from sweet to crude. It was clear Samantha had been trying to put herself out there to find companionship amidst the chaos of her life. one conversation stood out. A man named David, whose messages were kind and thoughtful. They'd been chatting for a few weeks, and it seemed they had plans to meet for coffee in a few days. He stared at the screen, conflicting emotions roiling within him. On one hand, he felt a spark of excitement at the prospect of experiencing romance from this new perspective. On the other, guilt gnawed at him. This wasn't his life to live, his relationships to explore. As he set the phone aside, his gaze fell on a framed photo on the bedside table. It showed Samantha, him now, with a man and a little boy, all smiles and laughter. Her previous family, he realized, the life she'd left behind. Tears welled up unbidden as the full weight of what he'd done crashed over him. He'd stolen not just Samantha's body, but her entire existence. Her struggles, her joys, her heartbreaks. All of it was now his to bear. And somewhere out there, in his old body, was Samantha herself. Thrust into a life she hadn't asked for, separated from her daughter, her mother, everything she knew and loved. What had he done? Sleep eluded him that night, his mind a whirlwind of regret and anxiety. When Leslie's cries pierced the pre-dawn darkness, he almost welcomed the distraction. Cradling the baby close, he breathed in her sweet scent, marveling at the rush of love he felt. It was primal, instinctive, a mother's love for her child. Even though he knew he wasn't truly Samantha, the bond felt real, overwhelming in its intensity. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, rocking gently. "I've made such a mess of things." Leslie cooed, tiny fingers grasping at his shirt. In that moment, he made a decision. He couldn't undo what he'd done, but he could try to make things right, to be the best Samantha he could be, for Leslie's sake, if nothing else. The days that followed were a crash course in single motherhood and survival. He threw himself into Samantha's routines, learning the intricacies of her life through trial and error. He discovered the hard way that Leslie was allergic to strawberries, spending a terrifying night in the ER after an ill-advised snack. He learned to navigate the complex social dynamics of the playground, fending off judgmental looks from other parents when Leslie had a meltdown in public. Work remained a challenge. At the office, he struggled to keep up with projects he knew nothing about, relying heavily on old emails and notes to fake his way through meetings. The diner was marginally easier, muscle memory taking over as he fell into the rhythm of orders and tables. Through it all, the constant specter of financial worry loomed. He juggled bills, robbing Peter to pay Paul, the stack of past due notices never seeming to shrink. But there were moments of joy, too. Leslie's first steps, taken on a rare day off, filled him with a pride he'd never known before. The simple pleasure of a shared meal with Samantha's mother, laughing over some family anecdote, warmed him in ways he couldn't articulate. And then there was David. Their coffee date, rescheduled twice due to childcare issues, finally happened on a crisp Saturday morning. He'd agonized over whether to go through with it, the ethical implications of pursuing a relationship in a borrowed life weighing heavily on him. But loneliness, a constant companion in Samantha's world, won out in the end. David was everything his messages had promised, kind, funny, with a quiet intelligence that put him at ease. As they talked, he found himself forgetting, just for a moment, that he wasn't really Samantha. "So tell me about Leslie," David said, leaning forward with genuine interest. "She must be, almost 2 now?" He nodded, a smile spreading across his face. 20 months next week. She's amazing. Exhausting, but amazing." "I bet," David chuckled. "My nephew's about the same age. It's like watching a tornado in human form." The conversation flowed easily, touching on work, family, hopes, and dreams. By the time they said goodbye, with promises to meet again soon, he felt a flutter of something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. As weeks turned to months, he settled into Samantha's life with increasing comfort. The initial panic and disorientation faded, replaced by a growing sense of purpose. He wasn't just playing a role anymore, he was living it, embracing the challenges and joys of Samantha's existence. Leslie grew and changed before his eyes, her personality blossoming into a vibrant, curious little girl. He found himself marveling at her resilience, her ability to find joy in the simplest things despite the often difficult circumstances of their life. His relationship with David deepened, moving from casual dates to something more meaningful. David's patience with the complexities of single parenthood, his willingness to be a part of Leslie's life, touched him deeply. But even as he found happiness in this new life, guilt continued to gnaw at him. He thought often of the real Samantha, wondering how she was faring in his old body, in his old life. Had she adjusted as he had? Was she happy? Did she miss her daughter with an ache that never quite faded? And what of his own family? His parents, his siblings, did they notice a change in him? Did they wonder at the sudden shift in personality, the inexplicable distance that must have sprung up between them? These thoughts haunted his quiet moments, a constant reminder of the cosmic mistake he'd made in wishing for another's life. It was on Leslie's second birthday, surrounded by the warm chaos of family and friends, that the full weight of his actions truly hit him. Watching Samantha's mother coo over her granddaughter, seeing the love and pride shining in her eyes, he felt a surge of emotion so powerful it nearly brought him to his knees. This wasn't his life to live. No matter how well he'd adapted, no matter how much he'd grown to love Leslie and care for the people in Samantha's world, he was an imposter, a thief of the most intimate kind. That night, after the guests had gone and Leslie was tucked safely in bed, he sat alone in the darkened living room. Tears streamed down his face as he grappled with the enormity of what he'd done and what he knew he had to do. He had to find a way to switch back, to return Samantha to her rightful place, to her daughter, her family, her life. It wouldn't be easy. He had no idea how to even begin, but he knew it was the only right course of action. As dawn broke, casting pale light through the window, he made a silent vow. He would continue to be the best Samantha he could be, to care for Leslie and nurture the relationships he'd built. But he would also search tirelessly for a way to undo the wish, to set things right. It was the least he could do, after all he'd taken. After all he'd learned about the strength, resilience, and beauty of the life he'd so carelessly coveted. In becoming Samantha, he'd found parts of himself he never knew existed. Now it was time to find a way home, for both of them. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out Patreon for a lot more content and early access to YouTube videos.